When I was in college, my father gave me a ring, and it had been my grandmother's, and my grandfather had given it to her. And when he died, my dad gave it to me, and he said, "Oh, I want you to have this ring. It was your grandfather's." And it was one of those moments that was really sweet, and I was like, "Thanks, Dad." And I put it on my finger, and I wore it to do everything. I played football in college, so I wore it to play football, and I dissected stuff, and I washed dishes with it, and I would rock climb with it, and it got all dinged up and really dirty. But it was special, and that was okay. Until the day that my dad called me on the phone and he said, "Hey, Jennifer Lee, I want you to take that ring I gave you to the jewelry store and ask the jeweler to appraise it. Find out how much it's worth because I need to know so if anything ever happens to it." And I was like, "Oh, okay, got it." And I walk into the jewelry store and I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, this ring has like just dirt and dead stuff on it." And I walk up to the counter and I'm like, I have this ring, and I know you probably have better stuff but can you tell me how much it's worth?" And I just hand it to the jeweler, and he looks at it, and he starts rubbing on it a little bit, and he puts one of those big things in his eye where he's like, looking real close at it. And then he starts going, "Oh, ooh, wow." And I'm like, okay, surely he's not looking at my ring. And I give him this really funny look, and he's like, "Do you want to see what I see?" And I was like, "I would love to see what you see." So he pulls me back there, and he starts to point to these things on my ring. He's like, "Do you see that?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I totally put that in there when I was playing foot." And he's like, No, you didn't do that. That was put there by the designer for a purpose." "Oh, I thought that was a scratch." No. And he starts to reveal to me all these great truths about this ring that I never knew. And then he takes it all cleaned up and shined, and he hands it to me, and he says, "Remember that this is of great value." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And all of a sudden, I walked out of the jewelry store, and I was like walking back on college campus. I'm like, "I have a ring of great value." That's right. It's of great value. You might not like it, but I love it because it's of great value. But there are times that I feel like I walk through life and I do things that totally embarrass me. Or I have that friend that's just beautiful. How many of you have a beautiful friend? Okay, and I feel like, see, everybody does. It's like a code of life. I feel like I go places with my beautiful friend and I'm like, "Oh, I'm the ugly friend today." You know? You don't want to be that, but you have that moment and it just wears on me. Or I feel like I get dirty and dinged up and I forget that I need to walk to Jesus and kind of sit at his feet and say, "Okay, what do you see? God, let me see what you see." And I need to listen to his voice, and I need to hear him say, "I see something of great value. I made you for a purpose." See, when I was a little girl, I always had a really loud voice, and two things would happen guaranteed in my house. My big brother would say, "Jennifer, why do you have to talk so loud?" And my parents would say, "Use your inside voice." And I'd always say, "This is my inside voice." And they get so frustrated. And I thought, "Oh, why am I like that?" And God said, "Because one day I will call you to use your voice for my sake." And sure enough, now I get to be a speaker, and I go and I get to speak places where they don't even have microphones. But because I have this extremely loud voice, I get to go anyways. And my dad is still dumbfounded at the fact that my job is to talk. But I love it. God designed me for a purpose, and those things in me that I thought were not special, he said, "No, I put it there for a reason." Every one of you is designed for a specific purpose. But then on top of that purpose, he has called every one of us to a task. No matter what you do right now and what your goals are to do in the future, if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a painter or an artist or a speaker or a musician, God has called every single one of you to one task. All of his people. He said, "Go into all the world and spread the gospel." It's the only task we have to do. I love it. We have one job. Go into all the world. And I think, okay, God, but how am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to do it? A few years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Ethiopia. And I was sitting with some girls. I was teaching English over there, and I was sitting in the classroom with some girls talking, great conversation. And then I would get up to teach, and I would ask a question. I'd be like, "Okay, so who can tell me what the word for go, whatever." So all the boys would go, and all the girls would go. And I was like, I know they know it. So I started to walk up and down the aisles and look at their paper and notice that all the answers were right. So I walked up to one of the girls after school one day, and I said, Adi, why do you never answer me in class?" And she looked at me and she said, I am but a girl. Like, why would I answer you? I'm a girl. And I thought, but you are a special girl. You are a girl God made, and you know the right answer. So the next day in class, I asked a question, and all of a sudden, all the guys' hands went up, and all the girls' heads went down, and Audie did this. She goes, and just looked. And I was like, Audie? And she answered it, and I go, go boss, Audie. Very good, well done. And every head in the classroom went, and all the other girls were like, what are you doing? You're talking out loud in class. Sure enough, the next day when a question was asked, all the girls went, and all the boys turned, and they started to answer and to ask questions and to be a part of a classroom. And when it was coming my last week in school and I was leaving, Audie ran up to me and she said, I used to hate God because he made me a girl. I thought, how can a loving God make me a girl? And then I met you. Thank you. I know God loves me. How powerful is that moment? There are girls all over the world that don't know they are special to God because their culture or their community says girls are not important. But God loves them, and he desires them to know that they were made for a purpose and that they were specifically designed and they are unique to him. And God's called you to a task to go into all the world. And one of the ways that you get the opportunity to go into all of the worlds is to travel. You got to do that. But not all of you will be able to do that right now. Some of you may never leave your hometown. But I work with an organization called Compassion International. And through letter writing, your letters can go anywhere in the world. And you can sit down and write letters to teen girls your age across the world. And say, you know what, oh my gosh, I totally had this crush on this boy and it was great and we were walking and then all of a sudden I fell down the steps. And it was really embarrassing. And you'll send that letter, and they'll write back, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, it's totally okay because I had a crush on a boy, and I finally got enough nerve to walk across the school playground, and I was walking to talk to him, and then all of a sudden a cow ran into me. Their worlds are different. Their activities are different, but at the heart of them, they are girls. And they want to know that there are other girls in the world who love them and care about them and who know God. And so our challenge at this conference is to say, how are you living out your task? God has said, go into all the world. And he loves us so much that he has equipped us for the very thing that he has called us to. God will never ask you to do something he hasn't equipped you to. He loves you. He's asked me to be a speaker, and he gave me a loud, obnoxious voice. Now, when I was a child, hated it. Now I understand it. He's called you to go into all the world. He has equipped you, some of you with the ability to travel, some of you with relatives overseas. Some of you, maybe you're going to meet someone here that will go out from here. He will always equip you. One of those equippings is Compassion International. I want you to stop by my table today and look at these packets of kids because each one of them is in need. And you, as a friend, can change their world. I believe that your generation is the generation to change this world. I have a friend who's 25 now. I met her when she was 11, and she and I have been friends for a long time. And I used to write her letters. We've never once lived in the same city. I would write her letter after letter after letter after letter, and one day she came to me and she said, someone had asked us why we were friends if we had never lived in the same city. And she said, you will never understand the power of a handwritten letter. So I'm charging you to say, a power of a handwritten letter from you to someone else may just change the world. The women of Point of Grace went to visit their Compassion children, which is one of the exciting things through Compassion. It's not just letters. You do have the opportunity to visit your children in their countries. I have a friend who went and for the high school graduation of his Compassion child stood on the end of stage, and as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, he stepped out to hand it to her. Being his child for 11 years, and he got to be there for high school graduation. How exciting. Your relationship is more than just some foreign person, but it is a friendship. The women of Point of Grace went to visit their children, and they made this video. I want you to watch it with an open heart to see that you too can affect lives in the same way that they said.